Switzerland's Eternal Vault, the ultimate wealth masterclass. It's 1945. The world is a smoldering ruin. London's streets are craters, Tokyo's skyline ash, economies gutted by war's relentless fist. But in Switzerland, the Alps stand like silent sentinels, their snow-draped peaks defiant under a crystal sky. Zurich's vaults hum with gold, untouched by chaos. Geneva's lake mirrors a nation unmoved. No bombs shatter these valleys. No tanks dare climb these slopes. Million, smaller than Los Angeles, watches empires bleed and becomes their sanctuary. Fast forward to 2008, markets crash. Banks beg for bailouts. Panic grips Wall Street. Switzerland, its franc barely flinches. Now in 2025, Switzerland's GDP per capita towers at $92,000, crushing the USS $70,000. Its banks guard 30% of global billionaire wealth. $2. No vast mines, no wars fought. Yet Switzerland is the world's eternal vault. Why do kings, tycoons, and nations entrust their fortunes to a land-shunning flash? How does a neutral speck on the map wield the trust of the globe? What's the alchemy in their alpine soul that turns restraint into billions? This isn't luck, it's strategy, discipline, legacy. Welcome to your 3-5-hour masterclass on the Swiss mindset. A blueprint to forge stability, wealth, and immortality. Meet Anna, a Zurich banker guarding empires. Lucas, a watchmaker carving time. Sophia, a chocolatier sweetening the world. Emil, a fintech rebel. Clara, a Lucerne storyteller. Hans, a sustainability sage. Elena, a diplomat weaving peace. Mark, a chocolatier scaling heights. And Victor, an educator shaping minds. And Victor, an engineer building tomorrow. Will crack open 5 books. The Millionaire Next Door, The Psychology of Money, Atomic Habits, Thinking Fast and Slow, The Richest Man in Babylon, and pit Switzerland against the UI, Korea, and beyond. Cooking, grinding, or dreaming under stars. This will rewrite your destiny. But here's the mystery that'll chain you to every syllable. What makes Switzerland's wealth unbreakable? Let's storm the Alps of riches. Section 1. Neutrality. The invisible crown. Switzerland's neutrality. Forged in 1815 at the Congress of Vienna. Isn't retreat. Its sovereignty. The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel says, wealth is what you don't see. By dodging World War I, World War II, and NATO, Switzerland became the world's safe deposit box. During wars, nations hid gold in Zurich, untouchable by invaders. Geneva brokered secret peace talks. By 2025, neutrality attracts $3 trillion in cross-border wealth, outpacing London's $2.7 trillion. Web ID 336. Meet Anna, 2018, a 30-year-old UBS banker in Zurich, earning $80,000 yearly, $2,000 monthly. Her studio apartment overlooks Lake Zurich, where she reads Atomic Habits by James Clear. Small changes compound. Anna advised clients on low-risk portfolios. Bonds, gold, Swiss francs, earning unshakable trust. By 2023, her team manages $50 million. Her bonus hits $200,000. By 2025, she's a director overseeing $200 million. War involved, politically split, with 60% banking transparency versus Switzerland's 99% secrecy compliance. Web ID 336. Tech-focused but tied to global tensions. Switzerland's neutrality is a crown no one sees but all respect. Your takeaway. Build trust like Anna. Start a $5 savings plan on Acorns, compounding at 4% yearly. What's your crown? But why are Swiss banks the stuff of legend? Let's crack the vault. Section 2. Swiss banks, fortresses of faith. Swiss banks like UBS and Credit Suisse aren't just institutions. Their mythology. The Richest Man in Babylon by George Clason says, pay yourself first. Its reputation first with secrecy, stability, eternity. Since the 1934 Banking Act, client data is sacred. Leaks mean prison. In World War II, as Europe's banks collapsed, Swiss francs held like granite. Wealth, $2 trillion, rests in Swiss vaults, dwarfing Singapore's $1, 2 trillion. Web ID 336, and a story deepens. In 2020, markets tanked. Clients panicked, demanding sell-offs. Reading Thinking, Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Avoid impulsive choices. Anna urged a tycoon to diversify into gold and bonds, saving $10 million. Reputation soared. By 2025, she manages $200 million, earning $500,000 yearly. Trust not flash built her fortress. Compare the U.S. Open banking laws expose 80% of accounts versus newer, less trusted. Korea, tech-driven, minimal secrecy. Swiss banks 200-year trust compounds like atomic habits. Your fortress, open a $10 high-yield savings account. You're only at 2% happy. What's your vault? But how do the Swiss think? Let's unearth their mind. Section 3. Swiss mindset, legacy over lust. Switzerland craves value, not vanity. The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley says, wealthy people live below their means. Swiss citizens save 19% of their $92,000 per capita income versus the U.S. the 4%. Web ID 336. They buy for eternity. Patek Philippe watches, Victorinox knives, Victorinox used by NASA. Meet Lucas 2020, a 35-year-old Geneva watchmaker earning $60,000, $1,800 for a one-bedroom near Lake Geneva. Reading The Psychology of Money. Time is wealth. Lucas crafted $50,000 Patek Philippe watches, each taking 200 hours monthly in a 3% Swiss savings account. By $2,000 saving dollars. Fund a workshop, earning $120,000 yearly. One craftsman, one focus, one dynasty. Compare Dubai, 70% luxury spending versus Switzerland's 20%. Web ID 336. Korea, trend-driven, 10% savings rate, 65% homeownership versus Switzerland's 70%. Web ID 336. Switzerland's mindset is a legacy machine. Your legacy. Buy one $50 quality item, not $5-10 so quiet. Let's probe. Section 4. Silence. Power in restraint. The Swiss don't boast. Atomic Habits says, small, consistent actions win. Switzerland's GDP grows 2% yearly. Steady versus China's volatile 6%. Web ID 336. Zurich hosts the UN, WTO, FIFA. Yet citizens ride trams, live in modest flats, despite $92,000 incomes. Lucas, inspired by Thinking, Fast and Slow, skipped flashy Instagram ads for his watches, focusing on craft. By 2025, his workshop's reputation draws $500,000 in orders from Dubai royals. Silence amplified his power. Compare the U.S. Loud marketing, 80% social media ad spend versus Switzerland's 30%. Web ID 336. Dubai, extravagant displays. K-pop hype. Switzerland's 98% public transport use versus EU. ES is 5%. Screams restraint. Web ID 336. Your restraint. Focus 10 minutes daily. Budget. Learn what's your silence. Let's dive. Section 5. Precision. Sculpting. Perfection. Swiss precision is divine. The richest man in Babylon says, guard thy treasure. Patek Philippe watches, accurate to 0. 5 seconds daily, last 200 years. Astronauts. This is discipline, not chance. Meet Sophia, 2019. A 28-year-old Lindt chocolatier in Bern, earning $50,000. Rent, $1,500 for a cozy loft. Reading Atomic Habits, 1% better daily. Sophia, tweaked recipes, cutting sugar 2%, boosting sales 15%. By 2025, her $5 chocolate bars sell in 50 countries. earning $90,000 yearly. One chocolatier, one art, one empire. Compare Korea, 80% mass production versus Switzerland's 20% web ID, 336. The US 60% automated output. Switzerland's 80% vocational training versus the UTS, the web ID, 336. Your perfection, practice 10 minutes, cooking, coding. What's your craft? But how do kids learn wealth? Let's explore. Section 6. Financial education, seas of gold, Swiss children master money by 10. The psychology of money says, behavior trumps knowledge, behavior trumps knowledge. Web ID, 336. Schools teach stocks, taxes, 5%, compound interest. Sophia, reading The Millionaire Next Door, saved $200 monthly from her $5 bars. By 2023, her $12,000 savings bought a $20,000 machine, doubling output to $90,000 yearly. Compare the U.S. 17% of schools teach finance versus Switzerland's 90%. Web ID, 336. Dubai, elite-only education. Switzerland's 90% financial literacy versus track $5 daily. Inabi Mint. What's your budget? But how do they innovate? Let's uncover. Section 7. Innovation, quiet revolutions. Switzerland innovates without fanfare. Thinking fast and slow says. Deliberate choices win. Nestlé, $90 billion revenue. Novartis, $50 billion revenue. Logitech, $4 billion. Lead food, pharma, tech. Switzerland spends 3% of GDP on R&D. Matching Korea's 2%. Web ID, 336. Meet Emil, 2021. A 32-year-old Zurich fintech founder, earning $70,000, $2,200 for a downtown flat, inspired by Atomic Habits. Emil built a $10 budgeting app, iterating 1% daily, adding charts, alerts. By 2025, it has 100,000 users, earning $1 yearly. 70% startup hype versus Switzerland's 30%. Web ID, 336. Dubai, 1% R&D spend. Switzerland's 50 patents per 100,000 people versus the US 30 fuels progress. Web ID, 336. Your revolution. Test a $5 idea. Fiverr, Gumroad. What's your spark? But how do they draw millions? Let's see. Section 8. Tourism, Alps of Dream. Switzerland's Alps pull 12 million tourists yearly, generating 20 billion tourists yearly, generating $20 billion. The psychology of money says, wealth attracts. Lucerne's wooden bridges, Zermatt's Matterhorn, 4,478 meters. Geneva's Jet d'Eau, 140 meters. Scream stability, meet Clara, 2020. A 27-year-old Lucerne guide, earning $45,000, $400 for a riverside studio. Reading The Richest Man in Babylon. Clara saved $300 monthly, launching $50 walking tours of Chapel Bridge by 2025. Her tours earn $80,000 yearly. One guide, one trail, one fortune. Compare Dubai, 80% Manmada. Attractions versus Switzerland's 20%. Web ID, 336. Korea, urban tourism. Switzerland's 60% ecotourism versus. But how do they sustain? Let's dig. Section 9. Sustainability, riches for eternity. Switzerland plans for 2100. Atomic Habits says, systems build success with 70% renewable energy, hydro, solar, and 95% recycling. It leads green living. Web ID, 336. No oil. They import, refine, export. Meet Hans, 2022. A 40-year-old burn sustainability expert, earning $65,000, $1,800 for a solar-powered flat, inspired by The Millionaire Next Door. Hans saved $400 monthly, starting a $5 EO consulting firm. By 2025, it earns $150,000 yearly, advising Nestlé, one expert, one mission. Where are the 15% renewable energy versus Switzerland's 70%. Web ID 336. Dubai 80% oil reliance. Switzerland's 50-year plans of desire. The UI 330 eternity. Save $5 monthly. Green funds like Vanguard ESG. What's your planet? But how do they unite? Let's explore. Section 10. Community, Bonds of Iron Swiss. Direct democracy is power. The psychology of money says, shared goals build wealth. Citizens vote on taxes, laws via referendums. 80% turnout versus the UCDS. 60%. Web I 336. Festivals like Fête de l'Escalade. 602 battle reenactment. Unite 9 million. Clara, Reading Atomic Habits, hosted free tours for locals, building trust. By 2023, her network drove $20,000 in bookings, hitting $80,000. Was her iron? Compare the U.S. 50% political division versus Switzerland's 10%. Web ID 336. Korea, hierarchical 40% turnout. Switzerland's 90% festival participation versus join a $5 local group, meetup, XUH. But how do they weather storms? Let's unpack. Section 11. Crisis Resilience. Stone in Chaos in 2008. Banks bled globally, thinking fast and slow saves. Slow thinking saves. Switzerland's gold reserves, $800 billion. Budget caps, 2% deficit and low 30% deficits. The U.S. is 120%, kept it unshaken. Web ID 336. Anna, advising clients to hold in 2008, save $50 million. Her calm earned UBS loyalty, making her director by 2025, managing $200 million. Stability was her stone. Compare Dubai, 2008 real estate crash. 20% value loss. Web ID 336. Tech dips, 10% unemployment. Switzerland's 5% unemployment versus the U.S.'s 10% in 2008 shows strength. Web ID 336. Your stone, save $10 weekly. Emergency fund at 4% API. What's your anchor? But how do they teach? Let's dive. Section 12. Education, Forging Wealthy Minds. Switzerland's 90% vocational training crafts, masters. The millionaire next door says, knowledge compounds. Free education, apprenticeships. Ensure 98% employment versus 92%. Web ID 336. Lucas trained at 16, mastered watchmaking by 25, reading Atomic Habits. He refines skills daily, 1% better per session. By 2025, his workshop earns $120,000 yearly. Education, vocational training dollars. Web ID 336. Dubai, 10% for locals. Switzerland's 99% literacy versus the USA 336. Your mind, learn 10 minutes daily. YouTube Finance. Coursera, $0. What's your forge? But how do they balance? Let's see. Section 13. Balance wealth with serenity. Swiss prioritize wellness. The psychology of money says, wealth is freedom. With 80% healthcare coverage and 4-week vacations, life expectancy is 84 versus the U.S. 336. Workers clock 35 hours weekly versus the U.S. 40. Sophia, taking weekends to hike the Alps, boosted creativity, doubling chocolate sales to $90,000 by 2025. Atomic Habits shaped her routine. Wealth, compare Korea. 52-hour work weeks, 10% burnout rate. Web ID 336. The U.S. 20% less vacation versus the U.S. 70% balances serenity. Web ID 16. Your serenity. Meditate 5 minutes daily. Calm, Headspace free trials. What's your calm? But how do they rule? Section 14. Global influence, silent emperors. Switzerland hosts the UN. WHO? Red Cross, thinking fast and slow says, Influence is deliberate. Matnow revenue. Relex, 50 billion market. Novartis, $50. Rule quietly. Web ID, 336. Amil's $10 budgeting app, inspired by the richest man in Babylon, reached 50 countries by 2025, earning $1 nearly yearly. Global Trust was his emperor. Compare Dubai, 30% regional influence. Web IT, 300. K-pop, 20% cultural exports. Switzerland's 20% global finance share versus the U.S. This 50% is colossal for 9 million. Web ID, 282. Your emperor, share a $5 tip. X LinkedIn. What's your sway? But how do they save? Let's dig. Section 15. Savings discipline as gold Swissers, save like misers. The millionaire next door says, frugality builds riches. Swiss save 19% of income, with 2% debt default versus the U.S. 7%. Web I, 336. Budgeting is religion. 70% of households use APF, like NAB, Hans, saving $400 monthly and burn. Read The Psychology of Money. Investing in green ETFs at 6% returns. By 2025, his $24,000 eco firm. Discipline was his gold $150,000 eco firm. Compare the U.S. 30% credit card debt versus Switzerland's 5%. Web I, 336. Dubai, 50% luxury spending. Switzerland's 80% budgeting adherence versus the U.S. 50% forges gold. Web I, 336. Track $5 daily. Mint, INAB. What's your discipline? But how do they live? Let's explore. Section 16. Culture, precision in heart. Swiss culture is precision, community, heritage, size, habits shape identity, direct democracy, 80%, referendum participation, empowers all, fête de l'escalade, celebrating 1602's victory, unites 9 million across 4 languages, German, French, Italian, Romansh. Clara's $50 tours, inspired by the richest man in Babylon, wove Swiss history, Geneva's walls, Lucerne's bridges, earning $80,000 by 2025. Culture was her heart. Compare the UUSS 50% cultural division versus Switzerland's 10%. Web ID 336. Korea, 90% homogeneity. Switzerland's 90% festival participation versus the U.S. Web ID 336. Your heart, join a $5 local event. Meetup X. Let's see. Section 17. Achievements. Titans from a spec. Switzerland punches like a giant. Thinking fast and slow says. Focus wins. UBS manages $4 trillion, 20% of global wealth. Nestle feeds 2 billion daily. Rolex $50 billion. Valuation defies luxury. Web ID 336. Sophia's $5 chocolates, inspired by Atomic Habits, 0 1% recipe tweaks, reached 50 countries, earning $90,000 by 2025. Small steps built her titan. Compare Dubai, 10% industry versus Switzerland's 30%. Web I 336. Tech giants, 15% luxury share. Switzerland's 10% global luxury market versus the U.S. The U.S. 336. Your titan. Start a $5 project. Fiverr, Etsy. What's your win? But how do they plan? Let's unpack. Section 18. Long-term vision. Wealth for heiress. Swiss thing. 2100. The Psychology of Money says, time is the ultimate asset. Patek Philippe's for the next generation motto and 50-year infrastructure plans. 80% renewable grids. Endure. Web ID 336. Taro. Lucas, saving $500 monthly, read The Millionaire Next Door. Eyeing his kid's future, his $30,000 savings became a $120,000 workshop by 2025. Vision was his era. Compare the UUS. Web ID 336. Dubai, 20-year growth cycles. Switzerland's 90% long-term investments versus the US $65 monthly. Acorns at 5% API. What's your vision? But how do they focus? Let's dive. Section 19. Discipline. The Swiss spine. Swiss discipline is steel. Atomic Habits says consistency trumps talent. Low 2% budget deficits. 19% on-time trains. SB. Reflect Focus. WebI. 336. Anna's daily client reviews. 30 minutes, 5 days weekly. Grew her portfolio to $200 million by 2025. Thinking fast and slow taught her to avoid haste. Routine was her spine. Compare Korea, 80% work intensity, 10% burnout versus WebID, 336. The US, 40% inconsistent savings. Switzerland's 90% budget adherence versus the UBII, 336. Your spine, budget 10 minutes daily. Notion, Excel. What's your focus? But how do they give? Let's see. Section 20. Philanthropy. Riches with soul. Swiss give silently. The richest man in Babylon says, share thy wealth. The Red Cross, born in Geneva, 1863, saves 100 million lives yearly. Swiss donate 2% of income versus the US 1%. WebI, 336. Hans, mentoring 10 startups. Read The Psychology of Money, boosting his ETO firm's impact. His $150,000 earnings by 2025 fund. Soul was his riches. Compare Dubai, 0.5% charity rate. WebI, 336. Korea, 1% donations. Switzerland's 50% volunteer rate versus the US 30% builds soul. WebID, 336. Your soul, share a $5 tip. X, LinkedIn. What's your cause? But how did they start? Let's rewind. Section 21. History. Roots of riches. Switzerland's wealth began in 1291, when 3 cantons swore the federal charter. The Psychology of Money says, history shapes behavior. Neutrality since 1815. Banking secrecy since 1313. Great Council of Geneva. Built trust by 1900. Zurich rivaled London. WebIT, 336. NSEBs, founded 1862, grew from $1 million to $4 trillion by 2025. Rooted in history. Atomic Habits, 1% trust daily, drove her $200 million portfolio. Compare the US 1970s oil boom. Switzerland's 500-year banking versus the US is 200 years. Shapes riches. WebID, 336. Not finance book, $5 on Kindle. What's your history? But how do they tech? Let's explore. Section 22. Technology. Precision in progress. Switzerland's tech is subtle but fierce. Thinking fast and slow says, clarity drives innovation. Logitech's $4 billion mice, apps $30, robotics, EES Zurich's 21 Nobel laureates, Einstein included, Lab, Ray, 336, Amos's $10 app, inspired by Atomic Habits, 1% daily code tweaks, hit 100,000 users, earning $1 by 2025. Precision was his progress. Compare Korea, 80% consumer tech versus Switzerland's 30%. WebID, 336, 50% software giants. Switzerland's 3% R&D spend versus the US 28% fuels progress. WebID, 336. Your progress 10 minutes. Free code 10 minutes. Free code Decam. But how do they diplomat? Let's see. Section 23. Diplomacy. Peace as power. Switzerland's diplomacy is its sword. The Psychology of Money says, trust is currency. Hosting the UN, WHO, and 200 peace talks. Iran nuclear deal. It shapes global order. WebID, 336. Meet Elena, 2020. A 38-year-old Geneva diplomat earning $90,000. Rent $2,500. Reading Thinking Fast and Slow. She mediated a $1 billion trade deal, earning a UN promotion by $2,000. Peace was her power. Compare the US 50% geopolitical tension versus Switzerland's 5%, Web I 336, Dubai, minimal diplomacy, Switzerland's 80%, mediation, success versus the US. ZL 50% builds power, Web I 336. Your power, resolve one conflict. $0, 10 minutes. What's your peace? Let's dive. Section 24, Lifestyle. Simplicity as wealth. Swiss live simply, richly. The millionaire next door says, wealth is freedom. With $92,000 per capita, 80% bike or tram, 90% hike house yearly, balancing 35-hour works, Web ID 336. Clara, biking to tours, read Atomic Habits, saving $300 monthly. Her $80,000 earnings by 2025 fund outstrips. Simplicity was her wealth. Compare the UUSS 80% car reliance, 40-hour weeks, Web I 336, 50% urban stress. Switzerland's 90% life satisfaction versus the US 70% builds wealth. Web ID 336, your wealth, walk 10 minutes daily. $0, what's your simplicity? But how do they ethic? Let's explore. Section 25, Ethics. Trust as gold. Swiss ethics are ironclad. The psychology of money says, reputation is wealth. Banking secrecy laws, 99% compliance. 2% corruption rate versus Anna's client first ethos. Inspired by thinking, fast and slow. Grew her $200 million portfolio by 2025. Ethics was her gold. Compare Dubai, 15% corruption perception, Web ID 336, Korea, 5% ethical lapses, Switzerland's 90% ethical banking versus the UESE's 70% forges gold, Web ID 336. Your gold, act with integrity, $0, one choice. What's your ethic? But how do they scale? Let's see. Section 26, Scalability. Small to global Switzerland scales modestly, Atomic Habits says. Small systems scale, Lint's $5 billion chocolate. Swatch $8, watches started in Bern. Geneva, basements. Webite. Sophia's $5 bars, tweaked via the millionaire. Next door's frugality. Hit 50 countries, earning $90,000 by 2025. Scalability was her global DA. Compare the UUSSA. Switzerland's 30%, Web I 336. Dubai, 20% scalability. Switzerland's 90%. SE exports Brazil, the US, as 70%. Scales global, Web ID 336. Your global, start a $5 side hustle. Etsy, what's your scale? But how do they connect? Let's dive. Section 27. Connectivity. Networks of trust. Swiss networks are tight. The psychology of money says, relationships are assets, with 80% LinkedIn penetration, 90% trade agreements, IFTA. Switzerland connects globally, Web ID 336. Emails app, networked via Atomic Habits, daily outreach, hit 100,000 users by 2025. Earning $1 million. Connectivity was his trust. Compare the US. 60% LinkedIn use, Web I 336, Dubai. 50% trade deals, Switzerland's 90% global trade versus the US 336. Your trust, connect with one person. $0, LinkedIn, what's your network? But how do they health? Let's explore. Section 28, Healthcare, Wealth and Wellness. Swiss healthcare is a light. Millionaire next door says, health is wealth, with 80% universal coverage. $10,000 per capita spend. Life expectancy hits 84 VC. The UZUS, Web ID 336. Sophia's weekend hikes, inspired by Atomic Habits, cut stress, doubling her $90,000 chocolate sales by 2025. Wellness was her wealth. Wellness was her wealth. Compare the UTUT. 50% coverage gaps, Web ID 336, 70% efficiency, Switzerland's 90% healthcare access versus the US, 80% bills wellness, Web IT 336, your wellness exercise 10 minutes 0. How do they secure? Let's see. Section 29, Security, Safety as Riches. Switzerland is a fortress. The psychology of money says, safety is wealth. With 1% crime rate, 90% police trust, is safer than Singapore. 2%. Web IT 336, Claris Tours, safe in Lucerne. Drew $80,000 by 2025. Inspired by the richest man in Babylon's, guard thy treasure. Security was her riches. Compare the U.S.S. 5% crime rate, Web IT 336, Switzerland's 95% safety perception versus the U.S. 70% bills riches. Web IT 336. Your riches, lock one goal, $0 journal. Let's dive. Section 30. Leadership, quiet command. Swiss leadership is subtle, thinking fast and slow says. Clarity drives. Leaders like UBS, leader Armati, $15 million salary. Prioritize trust, 90% employee retention. Web ID 336. Anna's client-first leadership via Atomic Habits grew her $200 million portfolio by 2025. Command was her quiet. Compare the U.S.S. 70% retention. Web ID 336. Dubai 60%. Switzerland's 90% leadership trust versus the say ours around led one task. $0 notion. What's your lead? But how do they diversify? Let's explore. Section 31. Diversification. Wealth in balance. Swiss diversify like chess. The psychology of money says, spread risk with 30% finance, 20% pharma, 20% tech, no sector dominates. Web ID 336. Han CEO firm. Inspired by the millionaire next door. Diversify. Solar, wind, earning $150,000 by 2025. Balance was his wealth. Balance to BI 70%. The U.S. 40% tech heavy. Switzerland's 90% diversified. GDP versus the U.S. 336. Your balance. Invest $5 in ETFs. Robinhood. What's your spread? But how do they teach kids? Let's see. Section 32. Youth education. Minds for gold. Swiss kids learn wealth early. Atomic Habits says. Habits shape futures. By 12, 80% manage bank accounts. 90% learn stocks. Web IT 336. Meet Lena, 2021. A 35-year-old Zurich teacher, earning $55,000. Rent, Brett, $700. Reading The Psychology of Money. She taught kids 5% compounding. By 2025, her curriculum inspires 1,000 students, earning her a $80,000 principal role. 336. Dubai, 10%. Switzerland's 90% youth literacy versus the U.S. on T1 skill, $0. YouTube, what's your mind? But how do they engineer? Let's dive. Section 33. Engineering, building tomorrow. Swiss engineering is epic. Thinking fast and slow says. Precision drives, $30 billion robotics. CERN's Hadron Collider. F's 21 Nobel laureates shape futures. Web ID 336. Meet Victor, 2022. A 33-year-old Lausanne engineer, earning $75,000. Rent, $2,000. Inspired by Atomic Habits, he designed $1 million solar panels, saving $500 monthly. By 2025, his firm earns $200,000 yearly. Tomorrow was his build. Compare the UUCS, Switzerland's 90% engineering patents versus the USC 80% bills tomorrow. Web ID 336. Your tomorrow. Study one tech, $0 Khan Academy. What's your build? But how do they relax? Let's explore. Section 34. Leisure, wealth, enjoy. Swiss leisure is sacred. The psychology of money says, joy is wealth, with 90% Alps hiking, 80% ski yearly. For week vacations, joy fuels 84-year lives. Web ID 336. Clara's Alps hikes, inspired by Atomic Habits, sparked $80,000 tour ideas. By 2025, joy was her wealth. Compare the U.S. 20% vacation days. Web ID 336. Korea 10%. Switzerland's 90% leisure participation versus the US. Z's 70% bills joy. Web ID 336. Your joy. Relax 10 minutes. $0. Park walk. What's your leisure? But how do they trade? Let's see. Section 35. Trade. Global gold. Switzerland trades like a king. The richest man in Babylon says, seek markets with 700 billion exports, pharma, watches, 90% trade deals, F to A, it rivals Germany. Web IT 336. Sophia's $5 chocolates, via Atomic Habits, daily outreach, hit 50 countries, earning $90,000 by 2025. Trade was her goal. Compare the UUSS 80% trade deals. Web IT 336. Dubai, Switzerland's 90% export diversity versus the US E80% bills go. Web IT 336. Your gold, sell $15. Etsy. What's your trade? But how do they bank? Let's dive. Section 36. Banking innovation, future of finance. Swiss banks evolve. Thinking fast and slow says, adapt slowly. Zillion. Credit Suisse, $1 trillion. Brace Finty. 90% digital accounts by 2025. Web ID 336. Emil's $10 app, inspired by Atomic Habits, added blockchain, hitting $1 million by 2025. Innovation was his finance. Compare the EOTS 70% fintech adoption. Web ID 336. Dubai 50%. Switzerland's 90% banking tech versus the US 80% bills finance. Web ID 336. Your finance, try one at $0. Chime one at, but your bank. But how do they inspire? Let's see. Section 37. Inspiration, dreams as wealth. Swiss inspire quietly. The psychology of money says, vision is wealth. Role models like Roger Federer, 500 million net worth. F's Einstein inspire 90% youth ambition. Web I 336. Lucas $120,000 workshop via Atomic Habits daily grind inspired Geneva's youth. Dreams were his wealth. Compare the USS 70% inspiration rate. Web ID 336. Dubai 60%. Switzerland's 90% role model impact versus the US 88. May 36. Your wealth, dream one goal, $0. Journal, what's your dream? But how do they govern? Let's explore. Section 38. Governance, trust in rule. Swiss governance is trust. Atomic Habits says, systems win. With 80% referendum participation, 2% corruption, Switzerland leads transparency. Web ID 336. Elena's $1 billion trade deal, inspired by thinking fast and slow, strengthened IFTA, earning $150,000 by 2025. Governance was her rule. Compare the UCS 10% corruption perception. Web ID 336. Switzerland's 90% governance trust versus the UES 70% bills rule. Web ID 336. Your rule. Vote one issue, $0. Local one issue trust. But what's the key? Let's reveal. Section 39. 10 keys to Swiss eternity. Switzerland's wealth is no spell. Atomic Habits says systems create results. 10 keys: neutrality, universal trust, Anna's $200 million. Stability, Iron Franks, banks, UBS, Utillion, legacy, Patek, Lint, Lucas, Sophia, discipline, budgets, savings $150,000, education, 90% literacy, Linus 1,000 students, innovation, fintech, community, 80% turnout, Claras $80,000, sustainability, 70% renewables, hands, precision, watches, knives, Lucas, Sophia, diplomacy, Yunnan, peace, Elena's $1 billion, compare Korea, speed over stability, web-eyed 336, flash over focus, your key, pick one, save $5 monthly. What's your eternity, but how does it end? Let's ignite. Section 40. Conclusion, forge your Alps of eternity, you're still here. Cooking under lamplight, grinding past midnight, dreaming beneath a star-drenched sky. That's not just grit, it's a cosmic roar to forge your Alps of eternity. Switzerland's gold isn't loud, it's Anna's $200 fortress. Lucas, $120,000 chocolates. Emil's $1 million app, Clara's $80,000 trails. Hans $150,000 green empire. Elena's $1 billion deals, Mars $100,000 green empire. Sweets, Lina's 1,000 mines, Victor's $200,000. No wars, no oil, no flash, just neutrality, discipline, legacy. From $2, neath 4 trillion vaults. Switzerland screams, wealth is what endures. The millionaire next door taught. Frugality, live below your $1,000 means. The psychology of money time, wait 10 years for $5 to grow. Atomic Habits, 1% gains, save $5 daily. Thinking fast and slow, clarity, pause before spending $50. The richest man in Babylon, saving, bank 10% of $100. They outran Dubai's glitter, the UIS, us chaos, Korea's sprint. If 9 million Swiss hold 30% of billionaire riches, what's chaining you? Too broke? Anna started with $0. Too busy? Lucas saved $500. Too scared? Sophia risked $200. They forged Alps from dust. Will you? Seize this spark. Save $5 in acorns, compound at 5%. Launch a $5 cyber gig. Write, design, teach, learn 10 minutes on YouTube. Budget, code, cook, track $5 daily. Mint, IAB Atomic Habits whispers, 1% daily builds empires. Need their banks, just their spine. Grab your free guide, link placeholder. It's loaded with Swiss secrets, Anna's trust, Lucas's craft, Sophia's recipes, Emo's code, Clara's trails, Hans's green, Elena's peace, Mars sweets, Lina's mines, Victor's panels, plus book hacks, tools, Notion, Canva, Yinabi. Download it, your Alps blueprint awaits. Comment, what's your 1% step? Save $5. Start as action. Learn. I'm reading everyone. Let's climb together. Cooking. Murmur your goal to the steam. Working. Murmur your goal to the steam. Scroll it on a post-it. Dreaming. Roar it to the cosmos. What's your spark? Will you forge your eternity? But don't vanish. Switzerland's saga unlocks a galactic truth. What binds the world's richest nations? Long-term vision. Financial wisdom, ethics. How do they weave minds, communities, and gold into an unbreakable code? Their secret will stun you. Subscribe, hit the bell, don't miss it. You're unstoppable. Sculpture riches like Switzerland's eternal ascent.